Good morning and welcome to Daily Cyber Briefing for Wednesday, the 15th of October. I'm Stephen Ridgeway. SAP has published fixes for 13 security issues, including one particular vulnerability which has a CVSS score of 10.0. That one is a case of insecure deserialization and allows complete takeover of the server from unauthenticated user accounts. The vulnerabilities are in SAP NetWeaver. If you're vulnerable to this stuff, you'll know what SAP NetWeaver is. But for those of you who are listening that aren't necessarily aware of that, SAP NetWeaver is kind of the framework that SAP provides, into which all of the SAP components fit, but can also be used to coordinate and integrate other applications to create what I think sort of loosely defined as sort of virtual applications by pulling together bits of processes from elsewhere. So it's kind of like the SAP framework, underpinning framework engine. So yeah, 13 vulnerabilities, the most critical of which is CVE 2025 42944. However, there are various other quite critical vulnerabilities. 2025 42937 has a CVSS score of 9.8, and that's directory traversal flaw. CVE 2025 42910 has a CVSS score of 9.0. Which allows for unrestricted file upload in the SAP supplier relationship management component. So a good set of updates from SAP, although some quite concerning vulnerabilities in amongst these things. So if you're using SAP, strong recommendation, check out these patches ASAP. Appreciate that if you're using SAP, you're probably in a large enterprise type environment, in which case just pushing stuff out and hoping for the best is generally frowned upon. So there may well be some work to do. If you are concerned about any of these things, recommend that you have a look. The article in the Hacker News links out to the advisory from SAP themselves. So have a look, do your risk mitigation analysis, and apply the patches at your first available opportunity. Also, not also. The other one was the Hacker News. This article comes from HelpNet Security. There has been some analysis of mobile health apps, and the conclusion that the researchers have come to is that they are particularly bad for data privacy. They have used 3 well-known industry-leading tools to look into the code and what the code does. There's MobSF, RiskInDroid, and OWASP Mobile Audit. And they looked at, I think it's the top 30 most commonly used health apps on Android phones. So this is specific to Android phones. There's no research, as far as I'm aware, that's been done into Apple apps. I think just because of the nature of the way that Apple controls things in the App Store and the way that Apple apps work, it may be more difficult to do the research. I'm not totally sure about that. However, the key findings are basically these apps are doing things that they've not declared. They have got high risk permissions set, most frequent being post notifications, which allows the app to send SMS. Excuse me. Access to the camera, write to external storage, read to external storage, accessing various locations of device locations and so on and so forth. So whilst they focused on I think the top 30 apps, they've also looked at a great deal of apps. So hundreds of the apps have got these sort of risky permissions. Broadly, the apps can do things that you're not aware of. The apps are sharing your data with third parties that you're not aware of. Their permissions are being set without explicitly getting user buy-in. So despite the fact that apps are supposed to require user confirmation before giving themselves certain sorts of permissions, they're not doing it. So it makes for an interesting read. Particularly health data, the focus on health data for nefarious purposes, the risk of it is quite high. We've seen a lot of focus on that from sort of data exfiltration, extortion, ransom attempts, but also from building up a comprehensive profile of particular targets. So the problem is, although the apps themselves may be perfectly legitimate and may be doing exactly what they say on the tin, with the exception of they give themselves too many rights and they walk off with your data. But what you don't know is kind of what happens down the chain. So if they've given themselves a right to walk off with your data that you're not aware of, it's entirely feasible, and in fact actually shown through this research, that they then pass that data on to third parties. Now we're too far down the chain for you to have any input into what happens to that data at that point, which has got to be a bad thing. Now, people I've worked with in the past have been of the opinion that, hey, look, I don't do anything illegal. I don't care what anybody knows about me. I think that is a rather naive approach. I think whilst yes, we live in a world where we regularly volunteer lots of information about ourselves that in a pre-mobile app world we wouldn't have done. That doesn't mean to say that it's okay if everybody, including governments, states, criminals, adversary groups, whatever, can have access to everything about you. Is that right? Are you sure that's really what you want to be going on? I'm not entirely convinced that that's the right way to go with these things. So worth a read if you're interested in this. One thing, just to put it in context, one of the worst apps they looked at contained 299 critical issues, and another app they looked at had 11,000 high severity findings through these. So this isn't just there's the odd thing that slipped through. The view is that this is an insight into broader patterns with the way that these apps are being coded, and the way that they are the way that they work in general. So yeah, have a think about it. Do you really want all your health data being given to people that you don't know? Okay, and finally from me today, it finally happened. So yesterday was the last day of support for Windows 10. Unsurprisingly, there are now a whole load of people concerned about security issues. They've got fears over security issues. Yes, no brown stuff, Sherlock. This one's been on the radar for a long time. It's been on its way for quite a while. Just to be clear, for those who, like me, don't use Windows anymore, well, at least not in anger. I use it for testing and professional and whatever reasons, but I don't use it day to day. However, for those of you who might have missed it, the reason why Windows 10 going out of support is particularly painful is that the upgrade path to Windows 11 has got a strict set of hardware requirements. The key to those being requirements for, I think, what are they called, T2 security chips in the hardware. TPM2, sorry, security chips, and specific requirements around the compatibility of processors, which means that you can have perfectly viable hardware that in every other respect would be absolutely capable of running a modern operating system, but you can't upgrade to them because they fail on the processor compatibility checks, or they fail on the TPM2 requirements. That means that in order to maintain a secure patchable version of Windows, you're going to have to go and buy new hardware, and the timing is, I think, poor. I don't think there are many people that would sit there going, "Oh well, I'll just throw away my pretty reasonable but a few-year-old laptop, desktop, whatever it may be, and I'll just go and buy another one because, oh well, I ought to." There are, I think, restrictions that means that we're going to see Windows 10 living on. Right now, you could argue that, well, you've got the most up-to-date patches on Windows 10. You're going to be fine until, well, we'll check tomorrow, shall we, and see whether there are some new vulnerabilities that have come out in Windows 10. For large corporate organizations, of course, I'm sure that you've already done the the mitigations, the risk analysis and the mitigations designed for this. If you are stuck with devices that run out-of-date operating systems, no matter how much security professionals tell you that that's a terribly bad thing, the reality of it is, if you've got critical business processes that run on stuff that's out of date, you're at the mercy of the vendors of the software or hardware that runs these particular processes, and if you can't upgrade it, you can't upgrade it. Building in mitigating controls around that, I think, is absolutely critical. And from an enterprise architecture perspective, that's a perfectly legitimate thing to do. You just end up with a dispensation based on dispensation against the fact that it's out of date and has vulnerabilities, but it's mitigated by agreed and approved through agreed and approved processes, so that you end up with a dispensation that says, okay, we know we can't upgrade it, however, what we've done is this. We'll review it again in X number of months and see whether whether we're in a position to do something about it or not, and see whether the mitigating controls that have been put in place work, blah blah blah. That's kind of okay, but you need to be a reasonably mature organization to be able to actually manage that stuff. I've seen a lot of organizations that treat dispensations as a few people sagely sit around and go, yeah, right, well, we can't do anything about that, can we? No, all right, well, let's just keep an eye on it, and then nothing happens. Or even, we've put in place some network controls or whatever it may be, and it then just goes into the we've forgotten about it bucket, and never gets looked at again until those mitigations or those mitigating controls are no longer valid, and the device gets compromised in one way or another. And then, of course, the same group of people will sit around and nod sagely at each other and say, yes, we should have spotted that, shouldn't we? So it's not a foolproof process, but more mature organizations will have a working dispensations process to cope with stuff like, well, we can't upgrade all of our devices from Windows 10 to Windows 11 just yet because we haven't got X 100,000 or X million to go and replace a whole bunch of hardware across the globe. That's going to take a long time. Although hopefully you wouldn't be in this position anyway. If you're an organization that's that mature, you would probably have intercepted this one earlier. spotted that there isn't a get out of jail card for this, and done something about it, had your program of upgrades in place long ago, because this is far from new. If you want to read about the state of the nation Windows 10 wise, good article in GB Hackers that we'll link to the briefing. Okay, that's all from me for today. I hope you have a good Wednesday, and I'll speak to you all again tomorrow morning.